Hello there everyone, and welcome to The Theorist with your host, JC Botero67. Today we are continuing our reviewing and making of predictions for Anime Kujo's Revelations, Chapter 4. It was just released on Saturday, which is the usual days that she updates on, so there's plenty to talk about. I do want to begin with a quote that Sebastian mentioned in that first part where he sees Ciel in the church, and he mentions this, which probably sounded, at first it was just like, oh my gosh, like why is he saying this? But then you come to realize, he's got a point there. So I'm going to go ahead and read that to you right now. It reads, I always liked funerals, even if others tend to disagree with me. It is one of the few traditions that still has some dignity, don't you think? He sat down next to the still surprised student and continued. Weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, they've all been made into mockeries of their original purpose, but not funerals. No, they still retain the same sentiments from the day they were first invented. So, he does have a point. Weddings, I understand weddings, people want to make them extravagant because it's like technically a once-in-a-lifetime thing. So, you want to make a big deal about it because it's a very important milestone in one's life. And same can go for birthdays and anniversaries. Not every birthday and every anniversary, but milestone ones. I know being a Hispanic, we have quinceañeras. So, that's, a milestone birthday. Here in America, it's Sweet 16. And then when you turn 25, and then when you turn 50, and, same goes for anniversaries. And, on the Hallmark, they have, the little calendars that you get. They also mention on there, the gifts that you should give on certain anniversary years that you celebrate. So, I can see Sebastian's point as to people making such a big deal out of things because people want to stand out, people just kind of boast, I don't know. But I thought it was really interesting because really honestly, funerals are the ones that are more toned down. And it's for obvious reasons. A person has passed away. It's a melancholic time for their loved ones. So funerals are probably going to continue to be this traditional, compared with everything else. Times change and, there's always different themes too, people are into Doctor Who or anime or, whatever. And so, sometimes there's parties, birthday parties or, however you want to celebrate your anniversary. There's themes to that. So, I don't know. I thought it was just an interesting quote. It's kind of random for me to talk about that, but I really, it really got me thinking. And so that's why I wanted to kind of share that with everybody. And I'm sure everyone's kind of on the same page. Maybe. Not everybody, but, some people. But moving on, we come to Eloise and Claude. And they're in the middle of their study session, and they obviously have this connection. So, at one point, Claude tells Eloise that he has dirty eyes. And, for those who have seen season 2 of Black Butler, they know that comment had a different meaning in the anime, because there was this disgusting pedophilic guy who had bought boys to come live with him, and, well, you know what happens. But this guy in particular didn't like Eloise because of his eyes. He called them dirty eyes as well. But here, it's given a whole new meaning. And I really liked that Anime Kujo focused on that part of it. And I'll go ahead and read the quote, because this is probably making zero sense right now. Unless you've read Chapter 4 already, I'm sure you have. So he basically says, you have dirty eyes. And then Eloise responds, what? I have dirty eyes? You don't like them? Claude shook his head. No, I like them very much. I could get lost in such deep pools of lust and desire just like your smell. You smell like sin, heavy and fragrant like overripe cherries. So, I just thought it was interesting, because there's the different contexts of dirty. There's dirty like, ew, disgusting, get that away from me kind of dirty. But then there's also dirty like, ooh, turn me on, sexy, dirty. So, I thought it was interesting to see the phrase used in the anime put into a different context here. And now we'll move on to Sebastian again. And this is the quote in the beginning with Ciel at the church. Ciel accepts to go out on a date with Sebastian. And so, he's like, oh, okay, I'll see you Thursday, walks off. And so then Sebastian says the following. Be safe, Ciel, he murmured, as an ominous smile slowly spread across his handsome face. You never know what sort of dangers lie in wait for a sweet, innocent little thing like you. So when I read that, I was starting to think, wow, Sebastian really is a douchey, very evil person. Because this is how I saw it, was if there was there's obviously like a plan that Sebastian is forming to, kind of make Ciel fall for him and then ruin him. I was beginning to think, okay, there's a plan, but it's either Sebastian was in on it or he wasn't and is being used. And so I personally thought that he was being used. And now, with this quote, and then there was a later section in chapter 4, which we'll get to some of the quotes from there, there's a later section where, you can see this evil intention he has. And right now I'm just kind of like, I don't want Ciel to end up with him. I really don't. And I understand this is a Ciel-Sebastian thing, but I don't know. Sebastian really came off as like douchey and, manipulative of Ciel, and, it's only going to get worse. So, I don't know. I will obviously continue reading this fanfic. It's been amazing so far, and I'm sure there's tons more to come, tons more twists and surprises. And you never know. Sebastian could change, probably will change. He'll end up genuinely liking Ciel or loving him. And I think from that point on, with Claude, because in that later part of chapter 4, Claude is saying why don't you make a move already? Because they've been monitoring him since he turned 21. Or since he turned 20, I'm sorry. And it's kind of like, okay, it's been almost a year, why haven't you made a move? So Claude's really impatient, but Sebastian's like, oh, I have a plan, I'm taking my time with it, and, I'm gonna make sure that Ciel suffers. And so this is what Sebastian had to say to Claude in regards to that. The very definition of suffering is all about loss. But what sort of agony would one suffer if they never knew they had? If ignorance is bliss, then killing Ciel Phantomhive before he knows anything about his lineage would be a blessing. Once he fully understands everything that is at stake because of his legacy, then he will be a prime soul for the taking. So the word that stood out to me from all of this was legacy. And so it got me thinking, okay, what if this plan was part of a bigger plan that was there from a beginning? And so my thought was, okay, what if Vincent was the original chosen one? But with his death, Ciel, being the only heir, was next in line for being the chosen one. And then the overall plan is to eliminate Ciel, and by doing that, the lineage of chosen ones would die away, and that would bring down the light side. So, that could be, the whole general demon plan. But Sebastian wants to go in a little further and really mess with Ciel. We saw in the beginning how he was manipulating him by trying to get him to see, maybe all this stuff they taught you in church about prayer and all your beliefs, maybe that's all been forced on you. It's not anything that you really want. And so, and that's why I felt Sebastian was really douchey. Especially when he said, don't even bother praying for Elise, the girl who lost her soul. And, don't bother with her family either. And I'm like, that's not very nice of you. I understand he's a demon, but, if you're trying to approach this guy and get him to fall for you, don't be attackish of his beliefs. So that's one of the reasons why, Sebastian's not really getting on my good side right now. And that's why I don't want Ciel to fall for him. But, the things will change. And I found it interesting because I think at one point, Ciel vowed, I'm going to get back at him good on our date. And so I really hope he does. I hope he says something or does something to get his respect back. To be respected by Sebastian. And maybe that will kind of trigger Sebastian falling for Ciel. A little thing that will eventually get bigger and bigger. But going more in depth into Sebastian's plan, I think what he's going to do is use Aloise as a key point. And I mention Aloise because Claude was telling Sebastian, I ate him and it was amazing and blah, blah, blah. And Sebastian's kind of like, whoa, did you kill this kid? Because you're stupid. And he's a very important player in this plan that I have. So it got me thinking, okay, maybe they'll try and turn Aloise against Ciel. And Aloise will be one of the first people in Ciel's life to abandon him. And so that's going to continue. I think what's part of Sebastian's plan is that Ciel is going to eventually become distant from his family, from his aunt, Madame Red, Dr. Derless, from Lizzie, his best friend, obviously Aloise, who's probably going to be the first one that, they're going to make turn away from Ciel, or at least get Ciel to become upset with Aloise and distance himself from him. Then there's also Father Spears, Finny, Ronald. Eventually Ciel is going to distance himself from these people, and he's going to feel alone and, feel that no one loves him, cares for him, or understands him, and Sebastian is the only one who does. And so Ciel is going to basically be so dependent of Sebastian that when Sebastian strikes him with his plan, it's going to be devastating because Sebastian doesn't give a crap about him and is only using him to bring him down and bring down, all of planet Earth with him. So that would be so crushing to see Ciel have to go through that suffering. And that's the key, I think, based on that quote that I read earlier, where he says, once he fully understands everything that is at stake. So, it's basically the whole world. The light side, Earth, it's all just going to succumb to hell. And then what I also thought was maybe they capture Aloise and kind of torture him in front of Ciel. And I don't know. Maybe by torturing some of his loved ones, it'll kind of convince him to come to the dark side or to give up his position as the chosen one. Something along those lines is what I think would happen. Oh yeah. So this is going to be really random, but I was actually listening to Olafur Arnold's on Spotify. So, when Aloise and Claude were making out, and then there's this scene with Sebastian and Claude, sometimes the songs didn't really tie into the lovemaking, so it's kind of like, okay, it's a little awkward. But the part that got most awkward was that Spotify precisely went to a commercial just as Claude and Sebastian were getting it on. And it was a Trojan condoms commercial. So I thought that was really funny when I was reading the fanfic. I thought I would just kind of share that with you. But yeah, moving on, because that was kind of irrelevant. There was one more quote that I wanted to touch base on. And I think just as Ciel had his little scene in the showers in a previous chapter, I kind of think maybe Sebastian does the same with Ciel. So Sebastian is making love to Claude, but I think he's kind of picturing it being Ciel because of the way that he said these following words. I'll read them to you. I will tear you apart, Ciel Phantom Hive. I will effing rip your perfect soul from your body and devour it. For you, master. And then Sebastian reaches his climax. So, it's kind of random. Obviously they were talking about Ciel, but for them to kind of continue talking about him during a lovemaking scene, was a little interesting, I guess you could say. So, maybe instead of masturbating, Sebastian kind of imagined Claude being Ciel. So, that is all I had to say about that. I mean, I don't know, this plan might not happen. It might be taken by the hands of Claude or maybe a third character. We don't know. So, I'm really hoping that Sebastian isn't going to be the one to bring down Ciel. I mean, what I just discussed about his plan is just kind of a prediction. It's a prediction. So that might be what happens. That might not be. There might be something else he's cooking up, and, we'll see later on. I'm sure there'll be hints for us. But it could also be that Sebastian never goes through with his plan after all. And maybe Claude is the one who decides to take on the plan, or a plan of his own, or there might be a third character involved who decides to take on his own agenda, so to speak, and try to bring down Ciel or eliminate him or whatnot. So if that happens, if Ciel does end up suffering at the hands of somebody else, I'm hoping Sebastian would step in and kind of give up his life for Ciel or do anything to help Ciel out of that situation. So, I'm sure there are plenty more chapters to come. There's always little things that we can nitpick from these chapters to kind of predict what'll happen. So, until we get to those parts, then, we'll see what will end up happening. So, thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for your patience in this much longer video, and we'll see you in the Chapter 5 vid.